All right, thanks for the reminder. Okay, Hassan, it's all yours.
Okay. Hi there. My name is Hassan. As John said, I volunteer with Vector, and in the last couple of years, I've got my amateur radio license, and I'm visited Deep end of last summer and reviewed the radios in the Deep container, and have been in discussions with John ever since. And I put this presentation together just to sort of overview the use of the radios as a tool in an emergency. Now, this is not a tutorial on how to use radios. This is basically a presentation of my observations and how radios can be an absolutely critical tool in an emergency. And what I've done is, before I start the presentation, is I have basically looked at it from an individual and a group setting for an emergency, and put some things in there that maybe you have not considered. And this is just a brief summary, and where did it go? Just a moment here. Sorry, I'm having a little technical problem here as I'm trying to bring up the presentation. There we go. So I have some ideas in this for Deep and its members to think about, and I'll just start the presentation now. I will be repeating a lot of things. Oh, I need you to enable me to share my screen, John.
Okay. Oh, don't want to do it that way.
Go to participants or to the three dots on his screen.
Yeah.
Okay, I am now the co-host.
Yeah.
Just a moment. Let's start. Can you see my screen?
No.
Okay, let's try this again. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Okay, and we'll go to slideshow. And can you still see it?
Yeah.
Okay. So I've thought through what a group like Deep would need in an emergency. And I will be going through this presentation in a way that reviews some scenarios. I'll be repeating a lot of things that all of you, I'm sure, already know, but I'll just summarize those slides very quickly, and then sort of get to the idea portion and thought. So, what happens if there was a major earthquake in Vancouver? And basically, we would probably end up being invaded by the Flintstones. So, and then how would you cope or manage in that situation? And I'm trying to figure out how to use my screen. So radios are, in an emergency are absolutely vital and critical. And all the major hospitals, all the major groups have some kind of a radio backup system as an absolute backup, because you don't need infrastructure. And so just going to review why they're a necessity, how to use a handheld radio to communicate in an emergency, and also how you can use it recreationally, and how you can use it, radios as a group. So just a summary, what could happen in Vancouver? We could have a magnitude 9 earthquake. We could have a magnitude 7.5 shallow crustal earthquake. Godzilla is a metaphor. Tsunamis, flooding, volcanoes, cyber warfare can knock out our communications power grid system. Dr. Evil again, a metaphor. Anything can happen, especially after the last 2 or 3 years. One of the big issues and why we prepare is in a major earthquake, hospitals will be damaged or dysfunctional. Electrical power will be gone. Most of your network, telephone, internet, everything will be severely damaged, if not totally destroyed. And as we've seen in November, when some flooding took out the highway and the rail system, Vancouver was, in a sense, isolated from the rest of Canada. And fortunately, they didn't have the same kind of issues that we had in southern BC. It wasn't as bad in northern Washington state, or it would have been a real critical situation for us. And if things had gone much worse, we could have had issues with, power, telephone, internet as well. In a big earthquake, and I'm stealing some of Carlos's information here, we could have a lot of injured people, a lot of fires, and a very difficult situation. And imagine a situation where there's a disaster has just occurred, things are happening around you, but you cannot contact any of your loved ones. And this is where radio can come in and hopefully be of help. So it's not, earthquakes and things are not exactly a happy topic, but we have to lighten it up a little bit. And an earthquake, even if it doesn't damage your house, you can always make quite a mess of it. One of the major problems that we would have if we had a severe earthquake is lack of power. Lack of power will mean the water systems won't work, the television systems won't work. And if any of you have been anywhere where there's been no power for more than a few days, life changes. A lot of people have what I would call a normalcy bias, that no matter what happens, things will return to normal quickly. But as this image portrays, if first responders and help can't get to you, or they're overwhelmed, or they're trying to recover themselves, you need to be able to help yourself, and you need to be able to communicate to help others and yourself. So the major thing that would happen would be, of course, no 911. If you can't contact your family, or if they can't contact you, it's another source of added stress to the situation. If your home is damaged, how do you know where to go to a safe place? Or how do you get friends and family whose homes may have been damaged to you? And how would they know your place is safe in that? So lack of communication will be very, very difficult for people. And we're going to try and figure out ways in this presentation how you can have maybe some form of communication. First step, and my background is working in very remote, difficult places around the world, where there is no phone, there is no internet, and usually it's satellites or nothing, satellite phones or nothing. So I'm just going to go through some summaries of what you need. The most important thing anyone needs is to be mentally prepared. You must think through a worst case scenario. If you were at home and there was a flood or an earthquake or a fire, and then think it through, it was 2 or 3 houses on your block, your part of the city, the whole city. Thinking through a worst case scenario helps you think through later on solutions. And thinking it through helps you begin a planning process of how you would deal and cope and prepare. The second step is not just thinking about it, but making a list and then putting action to the plans you've made. And once you've made, you've got your earthquake kit together, you put it in a safe place. You hopefully after this presentation will get some radios and put them in a safe place and practice with them. And although you may never use them, if you had to, it would give you greater self-confidence. Planning and action is an action plan. And when you implement your action plan, especially for an earthquake kit or something like that, although you can't predict what will happen, you have some peace of mind that you've done what you can. And I've been in this situation where you prepared for something and then it's happened, it's actually worse than you prepared for. You actually are in a better mental state. You have a little less stress than people who never prepared. And when you have that sort of a mindset, you have confidence that you'll get through it or you'll cope with it. And in a bad situation, that self-confidence can make all the difference in the world of how well you get through it. Not if, but how well. So what do you got to think through? Well, first thing you think through is, how would you deal with a small or a large scale emergency? And do you have a plan? And you've made a plan. If there's a fire, I'm going to go outside and call 911. Well, what if you can't go outside? Do you have a plan B? And then a plan is no good if you haven't told the other people in your family or in your house that you live with. And you have to get them to be involved. And you have to get them to participate and take ownership of that plan along with you. And then that way, you will all have that sort of self-confidence that each of you know what to do. And in an emergency, that is extremely important. So what do you consider? What steps have you taken to protect your family, your car, your possession? After the last presentation with Carlos, I'm trying to get my house seismically upgraded. And I put that in there for anyone else that might think it's necessary because I live in an older home. So that's step one. Step two, you plan for this emergency, and what happens when you're on the bus and not at home, or the SkyTrain, or BC Ferries? What if you're stuck in traffic? You've gone shopping, you're visiting a friend. You're asleep in bed in the middle of the night. And what happens to you and your supplies if it happens in January and it's -15, it's snowing, and there's no power, and you can't see? How do you cope? These are all things you have to consider as you develop a plan. So now we get to the heart of the matter. We all need to work on our communication skills. So how do you prepare a radio communications plan? It's not that difficult. And I'm just going to review AM, FM, shortwave, various walkie-talkies, family radio, general mobile radio, citizens band, amateur radio, VHF, UHF, and your supply of power, because without power, you can't communicate. So when you plan, always plan for the worst. And since we're now focused on only the radio and communication, how would you communicate? And which types of radios are most suitable for your needs? And then when you get a radio, well, you just can't put it in a covered and forget about it. You need to practice with it. So if it's 2 o'clock in the morning and there's no light and you're holding your radio, you know how to turn it on, you know how to change the battery, you know how to communicate with it. So as part of the plan, think through where are your members of your family, your close friends, or your group like Deep during the day. How many are at home? How many commute to work? How many may be away traveling? Are there any that are ill or in the hospital? And do you know which members of your family or group have medical issues that may require special assistance? If someone's a diabetic and they need special medication or other medication in an emergency, how can you communicate with them to get them the help they need? So if your phones don't work, because phones or cell phone and landlines are on a network and an infrastructure, your walkie-talkie will. So as this little meme says, when you're on a hike and you hear your friends complain about not having a cell service, well, I can go to the top of Cypress and call my friends in Vancouver on my little handheld radio and speak to them as well as a cell phone. And I don't need a cell phone. And in an emergency, you may have to do that. So we'll get into the radios now. So family radio and general mobile radio service, those are unlicensed in Canada. This image is actually of the radios that Deep has. And they're very good little walkie-talkies. They're very low power. They're strictly licensed in Canada. But because they have low power, they have small antennas, and because of the frequencies they're on, although when you buy them, the package, you might say you can talk for 5, 10, 20 miles. Well, that's true if you're both standing on a mountaintop with nothing between you. When you add built-up urban areas, it becomes a few blocks. If your radio is good and the radio propagation gauge, which I won't get into, your radio signal is clear, you can get out a bit more, but they're very, very limited. But in a small area, a neighborhood, I think they're actually quite excellent without having to go and get an amateur radio license. And I have some, in the further slides, I have some ideas on how Deep and its members can practice and learn how to use these radios effectively in an emergency. So with these radios, you only need to communicate within a few blocks and they're cheap. So like the meme says, just use the walkie-talkie, play with it, get to know it. The other one, which is overlooked a lot these days, is CB radio. I've had many CB radios in the past in my vehicles, and they're very good. They're a little bit more power and a little bit more range than the handheld walkie-talkies. They have larger antennas, more power output, and you don't need a license for them. So this portion is all about unlicensed. You can just go buy one of these, read the manual, turn it on, and get operating with it. And if you don't want to get licensed, it's worth looking into CB radios and these other ones. But the best option is amateur radio. And as Yoda says, the signals are everywhere. And ham radios, if you ever watch a disaster movie, they're always using ham radio to communicate. Because when everything else is down, it's a reliable way of communicating. I won't get into the technical details of how they work, but with an amateur radio, you can use what's called a repeater, which is the tower in the middle of the image there. And a repeater, just think of it as a cell tower. Now in Vancouver, you can, I can get on my handheld radio and speak with people in Chilliwack because the repeaters are based to work on one specific frequency, and the signal hits the repeater, and the repeater bounces it out, and the repeaters are on the mountains around Vancouver. You can talk at 60, 80 miles away, very, very clearly. I've talked to people in Linden, Washington on mine quite frequently. But they have a greater range. When you get licensed, you have more power, more options. You can talk off a repeater, which is using the power, or you can talk on a specific frequency, radio to radio. And there's a reason why Vector, which is the Vancouver Amateur Radio Society for Vancouver, works with the city of Vancouver as backup for city services, because amateur radio, licensed radio, is a tremendous fallback option if your phones don't work. So you get a radio, now what do you do? And as the meme says, I don't know if you can read it because of my screen, but it says, what are these things? I think they're pre-cell phones, which they kind of are. And when you get a radio, and we can discuss afterwards types of radios more specifically, you need to use them regularly to get muscle memory, to understand how to use them. The weather affects radio transmission, so you should use them on a sunny day, a cloudy day, and day and night has different effects on the propagation or the signal transmission. You need to know how long your batteries will last. Will they last 2 days, a day? If you transmit a lot, will they last 3 or 4 hours? And do they use reusable batteries? Do they use batteries you have to change? You need to know how to keep your radio powered up, or it just becomes a bookend. So a lot of people, when I hand them my radios, they don't know how to use a radio. It's like in the movies, they hold the antenna sideways. And if it's a vertical antenna and you hold it sideways, you greatly diminish your capacity to pick up a radio signal and to transmit. And then you need to hold a radio upright. You need to know how to raise and lower the volume. And you need to also know how far away you need to keep the radio from you in order to get your voice clearly into the radio and get a strong transmission. So it's just communications 101. It's something we can do if we ever get together and have a sort of a workshop on. I can bring you some radios to play with for the deep numbers. So there's a lot of joys to radio. It's a great hobby. You make a lot of friends. And the great joy of amateur radio is you get a call sign issued by the government. You get to pick the last 3 letters. You can get your license. You can take courses at Vector. Almost all the radio clubs in the Lower Mainland and across Canada give courses, which you can take in person or on Zoom. You can join these clubs and get on what they call nets, which is, I'm one on every morning called Rainbow Country Net, where you just phone, say hello, and listen to people talk about various things. But it's a way of practicing with your radio. So if you ever need to use it for an emergency, you have the ability to do it effectively. So in an emergency, radios are critical. I'll give you 3 examples. There was a hurricane in the Bahamas a year or 2 ago that one island was wiped out, and the only way they got messages out was with amateur radio. The infrastructure didn't work. When the Falklands were invaded by the Argentinians, the only way the British government found out about the invasion was when some of the farmers who were radio operators contacted their radio friends in the UK, who phoned the British government and told them that the Falklands had been invaded. After that, those same people helped supply intelligence to the British military in order to retake the island. So even today, last year, I think there was a volcano that blew up in the South Pacific, and it was ham radios that were vital in letting people know that they were okay or and how to get them help. So we get to the sort of the steps. Imagine that there was an earthquake and you can't reach out to anyone on a phone. You can't call 911. It's the middle of the night and you want to phone and help your friend. And maybe your phone is damaged. You got your landline and your contact list is not pre-programmed into your landline. Have you memorized the people you would call? Do you have you memorized the phone number of the most important person to you? Or do you have to go find it written down someplace? If you can't reach that person, who's the second person you call, the third person, the fourth person to get help or give help? So what I've done in my emergency kit is I made laminated cards with all my family and friends' phone numbers I would want to contact to check on. I keep them in my car, I keep it in my wallet, I keep it in my emergency kit, I keep it in my shed. And that way, every member of my family has a copy. That way, if you're in a panicky situation and you get access to a phone, you've got the contact numbers of the person or the people you need in front of you. One less level or one less point of stress. So you've got an organization like DEEP, and you need to have some objectives. How do you communicate? Well, first thing is you need to find information. What just happened? How bad was it? You need to develop situational awareness for yourself, your neighborhood, your group, the whole city. You have to have some objectives of how you would communicate with your friends, family, neighbors, and your groups. And the radios will help you implement any pre-existing action plan you may have developed. So first thing is the power on? Are the radio stations on? My recommendation is if the power's not on, go out to your car, turn on the radio and listen. If the power is on, go to the television, see if the internet's working, check your landline. Most radio TV stations have backup power, so they should be operating if they're not structurally damaged. But if the power goes out and they're working on emergency power, that has a limited supply. And after 2, 3, 4 days, depending on who's broadcasting, they may run out of power. So what do? You need to practice with your radio. Go buy some of the FRS, GMRS radios. They sell them bubble packs, London Drugs, Canadian Tire, Best Buy, wherever you do your shopping. Take them camping. You go for a walk, take it for a walk like I do and call home, and always be testing the range of your radio. If you're going on a road trip, keep one in each car if you've got 2, 3, or 4 cars. And when you hit a dead spot with the cell network, try using your radios to communicate. It's great practice. You might actually have fun doing it. I do. So how do you communicate if everything's bad in a group? So we'll go through some ideas here. What you need to do, and this is specifically looking at the group, DEEP group radios that I saw in the container at the community center. You have all these radios. Each radio must have a number. Radio 1, 2, 3, 4. And you need to keep a log sheet of who it's signed out to. So you need a tactical call sign. So a tactical call sign is if John is running headquarters for deep in an emergency, each call sign, each radio will have a call sign, and it'll be radio 1 calling in, radio 2 calling in, and headquarters will know who that is and hopefully know where they are. Deep has a VHF, UHF portable radio in the container, and that could be the command center. Second thing Deep should do is assign jobs to small teams of people. So search and rescue, medical assistance, what have you, whatever the Deep members feel they need to do. That way, in an emergency, there is some level of organization within the Deep group, and also on how to communicate within the Deep group using the tactical call sign. Because if you have 2 Johns and 4 Nancys in a group, it could get very confusing. I say this because I work with about 5 Roberts. So I have to use all their last names, because if you say Robert, 5 heads will turn to you in a board. As I discussed, in an emergency, the Deep container should be the operations center. The operator should have an assistant to help them listen, or her, listen to the information coming in and write it down and keep a log. And that's, I think, very, very critical. And that will allow headquarters, let's say, to be able to engage with Vector, the City of Vancouver, other groups or individuals that come on the radio, and maybe help pass information and help give assistance in one form or another to each other. One of the things that you need to do is, when someone is in an emergency situation has a radio someplace, they need to check with the headquarters at least every 30 minutes. So headquarters knows that they're okay. Because if you go quiet and can't track people and someone gets hurt, if they haven't checked in, at that point, headquarters will know roughly where they are, who they are, and how long since they last checked it. And if they're in an emergency, to get help for them. So one of the things you could do is do drills. It's a practice session with all the people's radios, and you get a script, say, hi, this is the Deep radio drill, and you have a map in front of you where all the people are with the radios, and everybody then says, checks in, says radio 1, radio 2, radio 3, gives their location, then gets out of their house, out of their car, walks 1 block over, and checks in again. And you map out where you have the good radio communication lines, and you map out where you have dead spots, and you figure out what to do, or if you need to put in a relay point. If you can't transmit from the living room of your home, you have to go upstairs and get to a window. And in an emergency, if you can do that, it will help you transmit better. It will be something you need to know before the emergency, not after. So you're a Deep member, there's been an earthquake, you have a radio, what do? Well, once you've assessed your personal situation and that you and your family are okay, and you are capable of going out and helping, you walk outside with, hopefully, you have your radio with a notepad and a pencil, and you begin assessing the damage to your house and the houses on your street, and who needs help. Is there a fire? There are fallen trees on a car. Are there injuries? And if you are now walking to the Deep headquarters at the Dunbar Community Center, as you walk, you keep notes, survey the streets, survey the damages, and if you're capable, report on the radio the injuries and damage. And when you do that, you always come in with your call say Radio 1, I'm on Elm Street, and this is general information, or there's a house on fire. You need to do that. You transmit, keep it as short as possible, take your hand off the transmit button, pause, wait for a response. These are just some things that can be put together in a workshop, but I thought I'd sort of put the seeds in your mind. So you've done all that. What do? By practicing that, getting that muscle memory of how to use your radios, you can use it without thinking twice in an emergency. Practice with your neighbors. You know, what do you need to do? Turn your radio on and off, even if you don't use it once in a while, to make sure it's operating, make sure the battery has a charging. Read the instruction manual, understand the icon, know how to change channels or go to channels that you need to, okay? Learn how to, it's called the PTT, push to talk button. Learn how to use it without cutting yourself off in mid-sentence, which is a beginner's mistake. And then the next thing is, you got to be able to power it. Do you have extra batteries? Can you charge it from your car? Do you have a solar generator, a diesel generator? How can you keep the batteries in that radio working so that you can be of help? Because if you run out of power, you're going to be in a difficult spot. So the point is, you have your radio, you know how to use it, have some strategies and methods to be able to keep on using it for 1, 2, 3, 4 days, or 3 or 4 weeks after a disaster. So that's my presentation, and please let me know if you have any questions, and I will stop sharing the screen. You're muted, John.
Right, thanks, Hassan. Does anyone have any questions for him?
Yes, Hassan, it's Colin here. You recommend that we get an amateur radio license. Does it cost a lot to sort of set up a ham radio system in your house?
No. I got my license a year and a half ago. I'm not very academically inclined. So at most schools, they have a statue of me as the worst student that ever walked through the halls of that school. And it's a bit of a technical course. And it's for those people who are willing to. And it allows you to buy an amateur handheld radio. This is a cheap Chinese one. It's about $25, $30, $40 now, I think. And I've got 5 of these for my family. And I painted them all the buttons different colors. So even the young kids know how to use them. So the white one turns it on as volume. The red one changes channels. Yellow is to talk. Hit the bottom silver to change the battery. And then I have a card for them as to, if it's an emergency, go to channel 104 and say this, and then wait and listen. Right?
So, this is like the CB radio or the walkie-talkie?
This is a walkie-talkie. This
Okay.
is the amateur radio, ham radio.
But would you need a license to buy one of those?
Now, I have to be very careful because there's a lot of radios are highly, highly regulated in this world. You can buy the radio and you can listen on it without a license. But if you transmit, you get into trouble. So I always encourage people, get your license.
I have a license for a marine radio. Does
No,
that-
that won't work.
It
No,
doesn't, okay.
no, it's a VHF radio. So, and you could, and what I'm saying, you can do with the walkie-talkie, the FRS, GMRS radio, or even a CB. But the key is that you have an ability to communicate. You see, and my daughter goes to UBC, so I've taken one of these radios and gone to the lookout on Marine Drive by UBC, and I live in Steveston, and called the house on my radio, and they could hear me, and that's because it's line of sight. And if you do it in downtown Vancouver, where I was volunteering at the Sun Run yesterday, it's a bit different when you're between the buildings, even with a more powerful little handheld than these. So I didn't want to get into any technical aspects of radio, other than how Deep as a group could utilize them as a group, and how you could also think about utilizing them personally. But my advice is get your license. It gives you all these options and allows you, it'll give you a great knowledge base to help you. You know, I think the most valuable part of the license is understanding how radios work, you know, and understanding how you can use them in various situations. And, pardon me?
Oh, I'm sorry I wasn't going to bring in. I thought we were at a pause.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, well, since you were on the first time, which is, I don't know, a month and a half ago or something, I'm not sure how, I was inspired, and I can talk to the licensing because I now have one.
Oh, you got your ham license? Great. Congratulations.
Yeah, well, yeah, I got that. And I have, if anybody is interested, I have a book that I bought to learn this. I did email Vector, but they didn't get back to me till after I got the license. So, but I have a book that deals with the basic amateur license in Canada, and if anybody's interested in borrowing it, they can certainly do that.
Thanks, Ole.
Yeah.
Any other questions for Hassan?
Anything on the material I had in there?
I have one, just, is Vector an acronym for something, or is it?
Yeah,
Just an
Vector
arrow.
is the Vancouver Amateur Communications. I'm a director of it, and I can't remember the whole name off the top of my head. You know, having a senior moment here.
Yeah.
But Vector is a group that's very closely aligned with the City of Vancouver, support a lot of City of Vancouver activities like Celebration of Lights and various parades and activities, and is the backup for emergency services in the event of an earthquake or other situation where the city needs help. So Vector has built a whole bunch of portable radio systems that are at various community centers, which in an emergency can be used to communicate with, you know, emergency services and the City of Vancouver to coordinate the system.
Because our handheld radios, we wouldn't be able to contact the emergency services. They have special.
No, that's why I
frequencies.
encourage everyone to get. That's why I encourage everyone to get a license, because those radios have very limited range, and under Canadian law, they can only be, I think it's 2 watts. They have to have a small fixed antenna, and only on those frequencies. And with an amateur license, you have a lot of frequencies. You can have a lot of power, and you know, and using repeaters every morning. I'm on the Rainbow Country Net, and you know, we listen to people talk about things in Chilliwack and Orcas Island and all sorts of places.
Any other questions? All right. Well, thank you very much, Hassan. And if anybody has any questions or anything, you can email me and I will try to answer them. And please let Deep know what you thought of the presentation so we can pass it on to Hassan, because he's kind of used this session as to test out his presentation on us. So we're kind of guinea pigs. So if you have any comments, please let us know. All right. Thank you, everybody. And Hassan, thanks
Thank you.
once again.
Thanks,
Thank
Hassan.
you.
Thank you,
Good
Hassan.
night, everybody.
Very
Thank you.
interesting. Good night. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
All right. Good night, everyone.
Good night.